Hello and welcome to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis and I'm the host. Oscar Mike Radio is about military and veterans stories, history, happenings, and inspiring things going on. And I'm joined today as part of the Freedom Tour series. I'm joined by Pastor Bob Waldrep. Pastor, I know I'm not supposed to say that. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Travis. It's great to be with you. Appreciate all you do. I know that you've got a great heart for our veteran community, our warriors, and do a lot for them. So what a thrill for me to be with you today.
Really appreciate that. Thank you. I want to start off with something. I grew up in church, but I have to say you're one of the first ministers I've met who makes veterans a priority. Not that ministers don't minister to the flock as a whole or certain groups within, God's kingdom, but veterans seems to be something that you are really authentically passionate about. And I was kind of curious for all of us if you kind of start off there about how you got into that.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I may have fallen into that category of not really reaching out to veterans at one time. But I actually started an organization called Crosswinds Foundation, which is actually intended to have more of a cultural impact, get into the culture and kind of address some of the issues that are going on out there, things that churchgoers and non-churchgoers get involved with, and hopefully try to create conversation where we could all come together and have civil conversation, I might say, as opposed to so much of what's belligerent that happens oftentimes. And as part of that, I created a film division, really just to utilize the film and how you can reach people so much better. Being a dad and having kids who were teenagers at the time, I understood that they're much more likely to watch a video than to read a book, So we started looking at film projects. And I had a buddy of mine who had served 2 tours of duty. He had actually worked with me at another organization. He'd served in Iraq and Afghanistan as a military chaplain. And so I asked him when he got back from one of those deployments, I said, what was it like over there? And he said, well, the first time I heard a thunderstorm after I got home, I thought I was under mortar fire. And I thought, well, that's a kind of strange because I didn't ask him what it was like here. I asked him what it was like over there. But the more I reflected on that, I realized he was really telling me how over there is also over here. I haven't been deployed, I haven't served, but when you listen to, veterans share their stories, that's often the case that at least a part of that war came back with them to where they are. So based on that, we developed a film about PTSD. And I always tell people that my motives were more about producing income out of it to make other films that I was much more interested in than it was to, actually create some kind of organization that reached out to vets. So I would fall into that category you were talking about, Travis, of, it's a lot of times the church doesn't reach out or Christian pastors and ministers don't reach out. What happened is we began to make that film to make it a short story or a long story rather short is that, I began to hear the stories of the veterans who were appearing in the film, and it was so touching to hear their stories and to see how devastating some of those stories were, what they'd gone through, that I felt like people needed to hear those stories, that hearing those stories could bring healing to other vets. And so we decided to give that film away free. And I do love to tell the story that when I told my director that it took him a while to get his jaw back up off the floor, that we were no longer selling this film for $19.95, but giving it away free to our veteran community and their families. And so, really, I don't really believe in coincidence. I believe that what we often call coincidence is a God thing. And I think this was a God thing that, God was like, Bob, I know you don't think you're going to be doing veteran outreach, but you will be. I'm going to get you there. And so we did a follow-up film to that, also gave it away free. And the longer I spent involved in the veteran community and listen to their stories and, interfacing with them, the more committed I became to, hey, we need to help these guys and gals. There's some things that we can probably do to help out. And so now that's really how I got involved in it. And I can't get away from it. In fact, I mean, and I don't want to get away from it, but it's gotten to the point now that it's really just kind of all consuming.
So last month I took your course, the Hope for Warrior course book.
Yeah.
And I thought that class was really interesting because in my view, it's almost good for anybody who hasn't served to understand certain things that, a veteran, first responder, or law enforcement officer is dealing with when they have PTS or PTSD situations. The whole concept of moral injury came up. And I was curious if you'd kind of, tell us what is moral injury, because that was the first time I really heard it explained, but it kind of filled a lot of gaps in things I was trying to figure out with PTSD.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that question. That's an important thing, I think, to understand. There was a time when PTSD, or often referred to as PTS, didn't get hardly any attention. It's been with us throughout war. We knew that there was some trauma associated with war, mental, emotional trauma, from even going back into biblical times. But it wasn't until after Vietnam that it really began to get a little bit of attention here, and folks began to focus on that, and that there's something we can do, treatment. And so that began to become addressed, and it still wasn't given all the publicity it needed, but it was getting more and more. So that was part of the reason for doing our film, is we actually wanted to educate the general public about post-traumatic stress. It was only after we began filming that we realized there was another component to this, of actually being able to help veterans and those who were experiencing as well. And so, we put that together. But in the process of researching that film, I came across something that was referred to in a few places called moral injury. And like you, Travis, I'd never really heard of that before. And there were very few, we might call clinicians or quote experts, who were actually working on this, just a very small. But what they had noticed is there was something that was going on with those who had been in combat or served in the military that really wasn't PTSD. PTSD really evokes a fight or flight response. It's something you recall that either causes you to bow up and get into fight or to run from it. You may have heard illustrations such as fireworks go off and, the veteran drops and rolls. He's responding to that, thinking he's back in combat. Or my friend who said he thought he was under mortar fire because of the sound. That was a familiar sound. But moral injury is more about shame and guilt. It's about, and not necessarily that a warrior should feel shame or guilt, but they do, whether it's real, imagined, should be or shouldn't be, but it's reflecting on something you experienced in the military, something you experienced in combat that you have guilt over, that you feel shame about. In our film, we share the story of one individual who was a Marine sniper, and he had actually killed, this is in Vietnam, he'd killed a Viet Cong officer, he said, and he noticed where the body dropped, and he went and he searched the body for souvenirs, which is quite common in warfare. And as he was going through the pockets, he pulled out a wallet, and inside that wallet was a picture of a woman and two children. And it suddenly hit him that here was a wife and two sons who would never see their father again because he had just shot that man. And he was just overcome with, guilt about that. What if that'd been his wife or his kids? Travis, when I interviewed him for that story, and he shared that story with me, it was 40 years after that event had occurred. And after we finished filming, as the film crew was breaking everything down, he and I were standing over on the sideline talking. And he said, you know, I've never shared that story in 40 years.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, you know, that's the pain that he was carrying. And of course, I told him, I said, you know what, you need to share that with some other vets and hear their stories as well. So it's that carrying that shame and guilt. And so the more I researched this and the more, and, you know, we began to interview folks and we put our film together, I've come to the conclusion, I think more of the suicides that we hear, a staggering number of suicides among the veteran community, are probably related more to moral injury than PTSD. It's just not being able to let go of that event or those events, that guilt, that shame. And so what the clinicians have come up with, and the solution to that is forgiveness.
Yeah.
And they're not approaching it necessarily from a religious context, just really whether you're, you know, religious, non-religious, you know, if you're a Christian, Muslim, Jewish, all of them come to that same thing. It's a matter that you need to get forgiveness from someone you believe has the authority to forgive.
Yeah, I think that was stated really well in the coursework. I didn't get a overly religious tone or a judgmental tone from the coursework as I was going through it. So I definitely see where that would be a powerful way to get healing. So you're doing all this. The next, component of this and why we're here is the Freedom Tour launch April 30th at the Bold Patriot. But one component of that is Chris Turner and Chris Turner Music.
Right.
Now, I've talked to Chris several times on Oscar Mike Radio and personally, and, we talked last week in a private meeting with ourselves, but, how did Chris figure into this? Because his story was one of using this to get healing for other veterans.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I want to go back to your original question or statement when you said a lot of churches don't reach out to vets to bring this full circle, because that is absolutely true. And one time some church leaders of a very large church in my city asked me to come show our film and talk to them about, how to reach out to vets. And so once the film was over, they loved it. And they said, well, how do we find veterans? And I always say it's like, like veterans are aliens or from another planet or something. We believe they're here. We just can't see them. But actually, vets aren't that hard to find. But for many people, they just don't recognize that. So the way you find vets is through vets. And that's how Chris and I got connected, in fact. But it's a wonderful community. And although I'm not part of it for having served, I have the fortune of getting to kind of rummage around in that community because of connections that I have through the films and the books that we've developed. So one of the veterans that was in one of our films actually connected me with Chris. He had heard Chris had a real interest in reaching vets and was looking for a vehicle or a way to do that. And Chris had become familiar with our films. And so he wanted to get together and talk about maybe using our film somehow and presenting concerts. So anyway, I went up to Nashville and we sat down and had lunch one day and talked a little bit and really hit it off as kindred spirits. Just
2 or 3 are gathered.
Just began to see that relationship develop. And we were already doing a little small kind of a concert series we do a couple of times a year called Songs of Hope. Where we, just do a show for veterans, about veterans, and then the general public to understand a little bit about what they're going through. And I've had Chris play in that show a couple of times as a result of that. And it just took off from there. And I've always told Chris, I got to figure out a way to connect with you and get you involved in what we're doing. And I think we're managing to pull that off now through the Freedom Tour.
So speaking of the Freedom Tour now, it launches, it's in flight, but it officially gets off the rail, as we say in Hawk, April 30th at the Bold Patriot. What is going to be the Freedom Tour? When people hear that, what should they start associating that with? Because it's not just a simple concert or a simple event. It's a layered, multifaceted approach to, PTSD support and treatment.
Yeah. It is. And you picked up on something that's kind of interesting to me, because this is quite common, that when you were going through the training, you kind of could see that it wasn't somebody who's not even a vet could get something out of it. And that's what we would hear from our films. We would hear people, that would come up to us and say, well, I've never served, but I think I have PTSD, or I think I have moral injury. So there's a need for this, and we're geared specifically toward veterans, but we think others can be helped through it as well, if they are so inclined. But we're specifically gearing the Freedom Tour toward veterans. And the idea is that we'll promote and put on a free concert by Chris Turner and an opening act at a VFW post, American Legion, some service organization that's affiliated with veterans and provides a benefit to veterans. And so we'll come to a concert, and at that free concert, we want a couple of things to happen. We want to provide the service organization, such as a VFW, the ability to hopefully expose what they're doing to more people in the community. So they invite people onto their grounds for a free concert, and they get to meet those folks, and they get to promote themselves. And hopefully some of the younger veterans will get involved in what the VFWs and American Legions and others are doing, because Travis, you probably found this out to be true yourself. In many of our service organizations, it's an older population now. It's a lot of them are the Vietnam guys, some of the Korean guys that are involved. So bringing that younger community in. But the other thing is, after we developed the films, we kept getting calls from literally all over the country. Well, what can I do now that I've seen the films? How can I get help? And since we couldn't vet all of these organizations all over the country, we finally felt like we were being led to develop a curriculum that could be distributed throughout the country and that people could do on their own. You as a vet could get our material and you could start a group yourself. You could get 7 or 8 buddies together and y'all could go through the material together, because the idea is to develop communication, share your stories, and let healing begin, and to really have a mission to each other, to still have one another's six, even though you're not necessarily in the service. So we developed this Warrior Hope curriculum that you're referring to, that you went through, and we call a meeting of warriors to go through this a Center of Hope. And HOPE is an acronym that stands for healing and opportunity, dealing with the past, and being empowered for the future, for a new mission that you're on. So these Centers of Hope. So what we'll do is, through the Freedom Tour, we'll take a few minutes at every tour in an intermission, and we'll come out and share a little bit about a Center of Hope, and that the VFW we're at is going to be a Center of Hope, and they're going to have guys and gals trained, ready to lead a group if you want to be part of it, and launch these Centers of Hope so that they can reach vets and bring healing that they need, whether they're struggling with PTSD or moral injury. It's a safe zone that they can come in and share their stories and be encouraged to get whatever further help they need to get.
Well, that's at the core how healing happens. And it's the veteran taking that ownership of her healing and being able to do it in a structured but non-judgmental way that I think is needed now more than ever. And I think the other thing that I would say to people out of your course is there's an action component. The course, puts emphasis on me, the veteran, or me, the person taking the course, of taking action where and when applicable. And I'm just kind of curious if you would speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. The idea is not to create something more for me to do or my team to do. The idea is to literally hand this over to the veteran community, to hand this over to a local group of guys and gals at the VFW in Nashville, Tennessee, or Birmingham, Alabama, where I'm at, or wherever you are. And then to take that on as your mission, because really, I think the solution to the 22 days of veteran, or 22 days a day suicide rate by the veterans, the solution to that is really going to be found within the veteran community. It's going to be taking the first step to share with a battle buddy, just like you would on the battlefield. Here's the need. I need you on my right. I need you on my left. I need you here for me, and I'm going to be here for you. But our culture and our society, particularly in the military, kind of trains you not to admit your weaknesses. Man up.
Yeah.
That's part of the very basic training that we hear. It's like one guy told me, he said, hey, if you're in the middle of combat and you scratch your hand or something, you can't say, oops, I got a boo-boo, I'm going to sit down, and rest. You got to keep going. But that carries over to mental trauma. You got to deal with the physical pain, the mental pain, the emotional pain, the spiritual pain. So probably that veteran community more than any other is taught to stuff that down and not to deal with it. So veterans taking on that mission with each other helps to open that up. And that's why I say, I believe that storytelling is the beginning of healing. If there's a sense of kind of a Me Too kind of, when I hear somebody's story and they tell a trauma that they're experiencing that I'm also experiencing, it's freeing because I realize, well, it's not just me, it's others as well.
Not to be glib, sir, but are you saying that misery does love company?
I don't know if it loves it, but it sure finds it. But I think misery is helped by company. Really, that's what we're saying. And it's, again, we tend to think I'm the only one going through something, and that exacerbates the problem.
Right.
Because then we begin to think, well, what's wrong with me? Travis is working through it. Travis isn't dealing with this. And so suddenly when Travis admits he's struggling with that, you have this freeing moment of, oh gosh, I thought Travis had it all together. Then, I'll never forget one. Again, it was another Marine that we interviewed. And during the course of interviewing him, and he had been, raised as a staunch Catholic, and he was a Vietnam vet. And during the course of his interview, he said, I haven't been to church in 40 years. He said, I would like to go to church, but I'm not worthy because of the things that he had done in service. And I thought, what a tremendous weight to carry, whether it's church or anything else, just something that you feel like you can't go to because you're not worthy to be there. That's a tremendous amount of pain and guilt to carry. So after the interview, he and I were sitting around talking. I said, let me ask you a question. If one of your battle buddies came to you, you'd invite them over to dinner, and they came over and knocked on your door, and they said, I just came to tell you I can't come in. And you said, why not? And they said, I'm not worthy. I'm just not worthy to be with you. And then they told you the story of what they did. Could you forgive them for that? And he said, well, sure, I'd forgive them. And I said, if you can forgive your brother, how much more can God forgive you for what you've done? Forgiveness is something that is within all of us. We're able to forgive, or should be. And so that's where that healing comes in. And so that's why I said the solution to moral injury is forgiveness. And that forgiveness just needs to come from somebody you believe has the moral authority to forgive you. It could be God, but it could also be your high school football coach. It could be, I respect Coach Jones so much that if he told me it was okay, it'd be okay. You'll often hear vets, if, Sergeant so-and-so, how would he feel if he knew I did this? Well, if Sergeant so-and-so said, don't worry about it, son, you're okay, he would feel relief and forgiveness from that. So it begins with talking, Travis, and that conversation is not going to start with veterans and non-veterans. And I'm sure you know this to be true. Veterans are very careful and close guarded about who they share their stories with. My dad was a World War II vet, and he never would talk about the war with any of us kids. Most of the stories I know about him, I overheard him talking to my uncle, who was part of Patton's group. Wow. And they would share war stories. But that's, they just didn't talk. Don't bring it into the family. Don't burden your family with these stories.
Well, speaking of stories, one's being written April 30th as you all launch, and the Freedom Tour will launch, and you go out into VFWs in Tennessee, and you have the support of the incoming president, Brian Walker, and other VFWs, Andrew Farr and other people, that Stephen Cochran, who's supporting what you're doing.
Right.
As we close this down, what does it mean to you to see that support from the VFW, from people who believe in what you and Chris and the people are trying to do?
Oh, it's an incredible feeling for us, and don't leave yourself out either, Travis, to have, someone like you that's interested in this, because what it says to me is that, look, I've been working on this. My buddy that I told you was a military chaplain. I started Crosswinds in 2008, and he kind of launched a group to reach out to veterans, just on a small level at that time. So I've been in this since 2008 to some degree. And to see the veteran community rise up and embrace it and take joy is seeing the veteran community say, we need to rise up, get on mission, and reach out to our other vets and take care of them, because the general public may not do it.
Yeah.
But we will.
Absolutely.
They're our brothers in arms. We're here. We'll do it. So it is a tremendous source of satisfaction, joy, excitement. And the greatest thing that could happen to me would be to hand this off to guys like you, and y'all just take it and run with it. And I can just be here to say, attaboy, Travis. Man, you guys get it. Get out there and get it done. I'm with you.
Well, we're going to meet, in April. I've taken the course. I've met Chris. I've heard his story. And I think there's a really great story being written right now with this work being done. Folks, you can go to Crosswinds. Is it crosswinds.org?
Crosswindsfoundation.org.
Crosswindsfoundation.org to learn more. I'll have that link in the show post. Pastor Bob, I want to thank you for all your time and work on this. We've talked in the past, and we talked last week, and looking forward to meeting you in person, sir.
Thank you very much, Travis. What a joy to be with you. And look, if you're in the neighborhood of Nashville, April 30th, come out. It's going to be a great show, no doubt about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you there, Travis.
Absolutely. The Bold Patriot is going to be the place to be April 30th, and we thank you in advance for your support. Well, that is it, folks. There's more on the way, and as we say at Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission in flight. Thank you.